Hey there, fellow dreamers and storytellers. Welcome back to Rosemary Writes, and I'm Rosemary. And today I'm going to get a little off topic. Originally, I was going to talk about Studio Ghibli and, in particular, Kiki's Delivery Service because, oh dear, do I now identify with Kiki way more as an adult than I ever did as a child. And so I got distracted, and this is because a few of my friends and I were scrolling through TikTok and laughing, and a TikTok came up about the Twilight parody movie. And before you click away, this is not another video about Twilight. There's plenty of those out there that have said everything that needs to be said, probably better than I can. What this is about is that wasn't the only YA novel of that time. That was filled with problematic issues. It was just the most sensationalized one. What I'm actually going to talk about today is a book that came out a little after Twilight, and it was in the same realm of the dynamic between Edward Cullen and Bella Swan. Now, spoilers ahead for essentially the entirety of this episode. The one that I'm talking about is a book called Hush Hush by Becca Fitzpatrick. If you're not familiar, Hush Hush was released in 2009, and it was actually one of the most popular YA novels of that time. It was constantly compared to Twilight. And it's a story of Nora Gray, an ordinary high school girl who falls for the mysterious and dangerous bad boy, Patrick. I can't pronounce his last name. I think it's supposed to be Spanish, but it might be Italian. I don't know. I'm not even going to do it. Just know that his name is Patch. As a teenager, I was completely captivated by this dark romance and the intrigue and the supernatural elements. But now I'm looking at it as an adult, and I'm realizing that this relationship was just as problematic as the one that we all complain about in Twilight. As an adult, I can look at it and realize that dynamics are troubling, but as a teenager, I didn't even really understand why it would be troubling or even that it is troubling. So let's go ahead and dive in. When I first read Hush Hush, I was really interested in the tension between Nora and Patch. And Patch was the quintessential bad boy. He was dark, brooding, and dangerous. He was everything that a teenage girl could find thrilling, and his relationship with Nora was framed as this intense, all-consuming love story. But rereading it now, with a lot more life experience under my belt, I can see that this relationship is so far from healthy and romantic, it is bizarre that we ever thought it was. One of the most glaring issues I have with Patch's behavior towards Nora is it's just from the very beginning. There are instances where he's stalking her, he's manipulating her, and he has control issues. And like I said, this was very often compared to Twilight, and you could definitely see the comparison between Patch and Edward. They are essentially the same person. And I'm sorry, a little side note, that this sounds a little different than usual. I'm a little more rambly. I had a completely different episode planned and a script written out, but this came into mind and I decided it had to come first. Anyways, back on topic. From the very beginning, in one early scene, Patch is described as following Nora without her knowledge, watching her, and making her feel unsafe. The quote from the book literally says, "He was following me, I realized. He was watching me." And at the time, it was supposed to feel mysterious and thrilling. But in reality, that's what we call a red flag. The idea of someone following you and invading your personal space without consent is not romantic. It is creepy and invasive and should be locked up. But anyway, the book itself frames it as part of the allure of Patch's character. Another deeply troubling aspect of their relationship is the manipulation and emotional control that Patch has over Nora. Throughout the book, there are moments when Patch's behavior borders on and sometimes crosses into the line of emotional abuse. He withholds information, plays mind games, and uses his power to intimidate Nora. For instance, in one scene, Patch is described as cornering Nora, using his physical presence to make her feel small and vulnerable, and then he says, "I don't have a steady girl, but I'm looking at someone who'd make a good angel." And as a teenager, this line seemed alluring and seductive, but there's something that's just so incredible about being the object of such intense focus. But the underlying message is super problematic. Patch's behavior is so manipulative and designed to keep Nora off balance and unsure of herself, and the book often romanticizes this dynamic instead of questioning it. And I'm just like, what? And what is probably one of the most concerning things about Hush Hush is the way that it normalizes these behaviors as part of a passionate romance. This story repeatedly frames Patch's actions as exciting and even desirable, rather than highlighting the dangers of such a relationship. This is particularly concerning when we consider the target audience was teenage girls who did not have the critical skills to recognize these red flags as they are. Now, if you were to advertise this to an adult and say this is an adult fantasy with aged up characters, we would be able to say it's just fiction. We can tell the difference between fiction and reality. I don't necessarily agree completely with that, but the argument could be made. But as teenagers, we know so little that we don't know enough not to think that this is how relationships are meant to be. For books like this, I feel like there should be some sort of trigger warnings or like content advisories. Hush Hush was seriously marketed to teenagers who, with readers like myself, I was an introverted loner. I didn't know what romance was. I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. And I looked to books to figure it out. And there were dozens upon dozens of teenagers that were like me, who didn't know enough to know that this was not okay. The lack of warning is dangerous. It should not be advertised as an epic love story. Now, again, I'm not saying that stories should not talk about darker issues, that they should not talk about these kind of relationships and the kind of emotions people feel in it, during it, after it. That's all important. There's a place in fiction for everything. But it's important that these stories are framed in a way that helps readers understand what's healthy and what's not. Honestly, revisiting Hush Hush has been such an eye-opening experience for me, because before I went back to reread it, I still thought of it fondly as one of my favorite books. And it made me realize how much my perception on relationships has evolved over the years, and it's also highlighted the importance of critically engaging with the media that we consume, especially when it's aimed at the younger audiences. Honestly, if you were like me and you loved Hush Hush as a teenager, I recommend you go back and reread it. You would be surprised how differently you look at that book now than when you were as a child. And again, I'm not saying we should stop reading books like Hush Hush. They're part of our literary history, for better or for worse, and they shaped an entire generation of readers. But I do think that it's important going forward to look at these things with a lot more critical eye and to have discussions about the problematic elements. Now it's a little easier with that because the internet is a lot vaster now than it was when I was a teenager. And I know I'm old and I can't believe I'm having to say that, but now it's a little easier to get that information than it was when we were children. But that doesn't mean that this isn't concerning and that we shouldn't talk about these type of things. Well, anyway, that's just been me. I've been ranting for like 9, almost 10 minutes on a subject that I don't even have a script for. This was just something that was bothering me, and I decided just to blurt it all out and get it out of my system to go back to the topics that I actually want to talk about, which will not be next week, but the week after that. Next week will be an update on my novel and what's going on with that. So, for those of you who have stuck around, thank you for following, thank you for staying, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, whatever it is that you have planned. And whatever it is that you're struggling with, whatever you have going on, it'll be okay. You'll get through it. Just remember that you've survived this far and you can keep going.